Why does Alabama always play their best football against the Georgia Bulldogs? That's the question that I have for you today, and it was a question that was running through my mind as I was watching Alabama lose to Michigan in the Rose Bowl yesterday. And I think it's clear Alabama's best game of the season was against Georgia in the SEC championship game. And if we're being honest, right, the Alabama team that we saw against Michigan was the Alabama team that, we saw throughout the season. But when it was time to play Georgia, they stepped up and played an A-plus game. They played almost perfect against Georgia. And as we know, if you want to beat the Dogs, you have to bring your A game. In fact, you probably have to bring your A-plus game. You have to play your best game. And that's what Alabama consistently does against Georgia. Even when Georgia knocked them off in the national championship game, I guess about 2 years ago, Alabama didn't play bad. Georgia just made enough plays to win the game. They executed better. Kirby outcoached Nick Saban in that game. And the opposite kind of happened earlier, I guess, last month, right, in December. Alabama gave Georgia their best shot. Seth McLaughlin, the center who had a terrible game against Michigan, saved his worst performance for the biggest stage. Bad night for him. He was snapping the ball all over the place. And he did it against Auburn, and it almost cost them the Iron Bowl. And in a way, his snapping did kind of cost them the Rose Bowl. He's been bad, or not bad. He's struggled hard all season long with the snaps. And I think he had some low snaps against the Dogs, but none of them were drive killers, right? None of them were game changers. Jalen Milroe played a lot better against Georgia than I feel like he has against anyone else, right? They played well in the line of scrimmage. They won the line of scrimmage against Georgia, but they didn't against Michigan. And I have no problem saying that I do, feel like Michigan's defense is better than Georgia's. It took me till last night to believe that, but I think it's clear. Alabama plays their best against Georgia because they know that Georgia is still the standard in college football. Now, they're not going to win the national title this year. Either Washington or Michigan will, but I think both of those programs are going to take a step back next year. So it's hard to say, well, they're the standard of college football. No, Georgia just won the last 2 national titles. They are a top 4 team in college football. Could Georgia beat Washington or Michigan? They could, for sure. But they're not winning that game 5 out of 5 times, right? Washington's a really good team. Michigan is a really good team. I'm excited for that game. But at the end of the day, it's clear that Alabama just plays a little bit better. They care a little bit more when they're playing Georgia. In fact, they almost lost to Auburn because I feel like they were overlooking Auburn because they were looking at Georgia. Now, I know that sounds crazy, right? It's the Iron Bowl. It's one of the best, biggest rivalries in American sports, right? But I think it's a fact. They were overlooking Auburn, looking towards the Dogs because that's the game. They know that they have to get through Georgia if they want to win a national championship in the near future or down the road. Because Georgia's not going anywhere, and Alabama's still always going to be good. But like we've said about Georgia, they've got to get through Alabama. Alabama's got to get through Georgia, and they always find a way to play their best, and that's one of the few things that I think Kirby Smart has to kind of get control of. Now, it's not against other teams, but he has to make sure his team plays their best and executes at a high level against Alabama, because Alabama executes at a high level against Georgia just about every time. They always find a way to play their best against Georgia, and it's because they know deep down inside this is the game. This is the game. Now, I don't think they prepared any different from Georgia to Michigan. They still have their system, right, that they do. They were bad against Michigan. And looking back on it, they could have lost that game by a lot more. They really could have. They were so sloppy at times. And it's when I'm watching the game, I'm thinking that Alabama offensive line, that's not the same group that, played really well against Georgia and knocked Georgia backwards. Michigan had, 6-7 sacks on Jalen Milroe? It looked like a completely different team, but it's not. Same roster, same coaches, and they played Georgia, again, probably 1 month ago. 1 month ago. If you're watching this on January 2nd, I think that game was played on the 3rd. So it shows you how much they care about playing Georgia. And they know they have to come ready to play because Alabama knows if we don't give Georgia our A-plus game, if we don't play our best, we're going to lose. And they find a way to, I feel like, play their best every time they play the Dogs. They don't play their best all the time against LSU. Clearly, they don't play their best all the time against Auburn. But when it's Georgia week, and I'm sure we'll see a solid hard-fighting Alabama team in Tuscaloosa next year. But when Georgia is next up on the schedule, it just feels like it means more to them now. I'm not saying it means more to them than Auburn. I'm saying that they overlooked a bad Auburn team because they were looking forward to Georgia. They had eyes on Georgia, and it almost cost them that Auburn game. They should have lost that game, and a big reason why is because dude at center snapping the ball all over the place. And again, where were those snaps against Georgia? Center was locked in. That defense was locked in. That offensive line was locked in. Jalen Milroe made some great throws that he wasn't making against Michigan. Now, again, I don't want to take anything away from Michigan's team, and especially that defense. They came to play. They earned that win. They won the line of scrimmage against Alabama, which is something that Georgia didn't do. Georgia had a chance to beat a totally beatable Alabama team, right? Lost, obviously, against Texas. Should have lost against Auburn. Played some bad football earlier in the year. They were rotating quarterbacks in and out. And, of course, they did lose to Michigan. This is not some great elite Alabama team. They just played at a high elite level against Georgia because they knew they had to. They knew that they didn't have to play their best to beat Auburn. They certainly didn't play their best. They played bad and still beat Auburn. And they played poorly against Michigan. Again, I don't want to take anything away from Michigan, but Alabama played bad. That's what they did. They were making mistake after mistake after mistake. They didn't block. They just weren't executing at a high level. And that's something they always find a way to do against Georgia. And that shows how much they care. And it shows that that program feels like there's only one program still ahead of them right now, and that's Georgia. Georgia's won 2 national titles since Alabama has. In 2020, Georgia's had a better overall record 3 years in a row now than Alabama. Georgia's still here. Alabama's right here, just as a program right now. And I think Alabama will pass Georgia if they beat the Dogs again, and that leads to a national championship. But yeah, Georgia had a golden opportunity to put themselves in a position to win a 3rd consecutive title, but Alabama came to play. They earned that win. They beat Georgia on the biggest stage. When it mattered most, they came to play. They brought their A game, and Georgia didn't. They didn't blow Georgia out. It was a very competitive game, but there are a few plays here and there that make or break a ball game, right? You either win by those few plays or you lose, and Alabama made those plays, and Georgia didn't, and they deserve to be SEC champions. They deserve to be in that 14 playoff. But then you watch them against Michigan, and you're like, man, they kind of look bad. They look real sloppy. They're leaving, guys wide open. A lot of just busted coverages defensively, offensively. Wasn't that push, that physical style of play that they're so used to playing. Nothing looked easy. Nothing looked super efficient, and they still had a chance to win the game, which is crazy in itself. But when Georgia's next on the schedule, Alabama finds a way to play their best. And I'm sure there's more to it than this, right? But it feels like, to me, they're a little more locked in as a team, as a coaching staff, preparation, practice that week is just a little more intense. It's a little more important when they're playing Georgia. And again, even in that national championship game, Alabama played well. Georgia played better. And so we'll see if Alabama ever plays Georgia and gives it their C game or their B game, because they're going to lose. They know they have to play at an extremely high level to beat the Dogs, and just about every time they've been able to do that. And that's how you beat Georgia. You have to play your best, and you have to play together as one for 4 quarters. And they find a way to do it. They're the only program that has found a way to do it, and it's because they treat it like it's the Super Bowl. And a lot of people are going to not like that comment at all, but when Alabama plays Georgia, it's the biggest game of the season. Everything's on the line normally. It won't be next year, because whoever loses that game in Tuscaloosa, they're still in the mix. They can still, get into that 4. Both teams are going to be in the 12, but you can lose that game and everything's still 100% in front of you. So the stakes won't be as high, but in an SEC championship game or in the playoffs, Alabama comes to play, because they know if they don't, they're going to lose to Georgia. And they can mess around and, give a B effort against most teams and still find a way to win. But, even against Texas, which is a program still on the rise, they're not back yet. They fell on their face against Washington. But against these big-time programs like Georgia, like Texas, like Michigan, they know moving forward they have to play their best. And normally they save their best for the Dogs, and I think it's because they still consider Georgia the standard. They're never going to say that. Nick Saban would never admit that. The players would never admit that. They play like they're number one still. They're the best program of all time. But right now, even with a win over Georgia, they know Georgia is still the standard. That's what I took from last night's game. I'm watching them just play bad football against Michigan a month after they played their best game of the season against Georgia, because they knew they had to. Just my take on it. Why does Alabama always play their best football against Georgia? You let me know in the comments section. We love to read that. We want to see you over on the website, though, over on Dawg Post. If you're enjoying these videos, just these general conversations, we do a lot of that over on the website. You can sign up to our free newsletter. That link is down below, and read everything you want over on Dawg Post. Recruiting info, insider team scoop that we can't talk about on YouTube. It's all over on the site. Give us a shot. Hope to see you over there.